You are listening to Okay, I've Got Some Thoughts, a weekly Ole Miss podcast under the Running Out the Clock umbrella that's offering up takes and insight on Ole Miss football that is clearer than a crystal goblet at a Grove setup. And I'm here to talk about the Ole Miss Arkansas game and also to talk about just some thoughts for what might be coming up. Now, I said last week that Saturday night was a must-win game for Matt Luke at Arkansas. I immediately felt bad as soon as I said it because I went back and forth all week with whether or not I believed it. And I think at the end of the day, I did end up believing it. I did end up thinking that, yeah, this was a really, really important game for Matt Luke, for Ole Miss. Not in the sense that he's going to get fired if he doesn't win this game. I don't think there's really anything that is going to result in him losing his job after this season, short some sort of public scandal or embarrassment or something like that. And I don't know that I necessarily see that happening with him. But yeah, it was a big win, and it was a much needed win for a fan base that really hasn't had anything positive kind of going on recently. And this is not the time or place for it, but the problems at Ole Miss go much deeper and much wider than the athletic department. But it was really, really good for Ole Miss to go to Arkansas to get a win. And I still haven't quite decided if I think that Ole Miss really showed a lot of improvement or not. I guess that will remain to be seen. But what you do is you come out of Little Rock with a 5-2 record. You've got a conference win, and all of a sudden you're facing down an Auburn team next week that is apparently in disarray. So I'll talk a little bit more about that game after we talk about the Ole Miss Arkansas game a little bit. And there were some things there Saturday night that I thought were really, really good. Jordan Ta'amu played a near perfect game, and when Jordan Ta'amu plays a perfect game, Ole Miss is going to win. Period. How many perfect games does he play? I don't know. It's hard to say that going forward, but he had a ton of passing yards, a ton of rushing yards, 3 total touchdowns. You had Scotty Phillips and Isaiah Woolard also chipping in rushing touchdowns, and you really needed those. You really needed to be able to kind of play a balanced game to be a run threat, and Ole Miss certainly was a running threat. I don't have the stat right in front of me, but they had around 300 rushing yards, which is huge. And you had Scotty Phillips continuing his really underrated season and kind of flying under the radar season, averaging about 5 yards a carry in that game, getting a touchdown. Isaiah Woolard actually ended up with negative rushing yards, but had a huge touchdown run close to the end there that helped get them within striking distance. And the other thing that was absolutely essential was Ole Miss finally used the tight ends. We saw last year Dawson Knox really kind of stepped up as a playmaker and looked like a really good player and looked like a guy that was going to be a central part of your offense, and a guy that you even kind of thought, hey, he was going to be kind of right there with A.J. Brown, DK Metcalf, DeMarcus Lodge. Knox was going to be a guy that could be mentioned in the same sentence as those guys. And then you also had Octavius Cooley, who I mentioned on Running Out the Clock yesterday as we recorded it last night. It's Monday afternoon, by the way. But as I mentioned last night, Octavius Cooley, I've watched him play since he was in high school, and he's just a physical freak. He's big, he's fast, he's strong. He just does so many things really well and checks so many boxes of what you're looking for as far as a intimidating college football player. Well, both of those guys have not done anything all year, and both of those guys stepped up in huge, huge ways against Arkansas on Saturday. And that's really good. I mean, obviously that's something that you want to see happen. And, I thought also that Phil Longo did a really good job calling the game, because I think that Longo Longo didn't rely on the deep ball quite as much. And I don't fully understand the way that Phil Longo's offense works. I don't know if the deep balls are necessarily his call or if that's just Tamu thinking I'm just gonna go deep and see what happens. I'm not really sure, but especially on the last two drives of the game, Twitter's talking about it. The Ole Miss fan sites are talking about it. That those are two of the best called drives of Phil Longo's 2 years at Ole Miss. That he worked the center of the field, he ran the ball, he allowed for Jordan Tamu to run the ball some, and that was huge because they marched right down the field and scored right as they needed to. And so, I think those are things that you can kind of look at and take away some positives and kind of be encouraged by. But I don't want to call them negatives, but that's kind of what they are. So negatives, the negatives of the game, the defense is still not good. It's just not. They gave up a ton of yards to Ty Story and to Rakeem. I forgot the guy. Rakeem Boyd. That's it. A lot of yards to Rakeem Boyd and Devwah Whaley. Injuries played a big part of it. Weird stat that some tinfoil hat wearers on Twitter are trying to spin into an actual conspiracy, but it's really just more of an anomaly, I think, than anything else. In the last 3 Power 5 wins that Ole Miss has, the starting quarterback for the other team has gone out. Going back to Nick Fitzgerald's injury in the Egg Bowl last season to the injury that brought the injury to Carter McLean against Texas Tech, and then the injury to Ty Story Saturday at Arkansas. But, part of that is Ty Story's insistence to not slide, to not get out of bounds, to really just kind of take hit after hit after hit. And that was a terrible decision on his part. And really only one of the hits that Story took that kind of made you cringe up a little bit was dirty, and Vernon Dasher got thrown out of the game. Obviously injuries played a part in that, but Ole Miss also doesn't have any healthy defensive backs. They lost another defensive end. The big news just came out that DK Metcalf has been lost for the season. So if injuries are excuses for other teams to say, we lost to Ole Miss, or Ole Miss beat this team, but they were hurt here, and here. Well, I don't think anybody's got a longer list of guys that are out for the season than Ole Miss does right now. So the end of the day, Ole Miss found a way to win. They got the stops they needed, which even giving up a ton of yards to find those ways to give up. To get the stops, to force some field goals, to do some things like that. It was a good night for Ole Miss. It was a big night for them, and just really pleased with the way they played. And I think the biggest story to me, and this has been a theme throughout Matt Luke's 2 years, kind of regardless of how you feel about him as a head coach, his teams have not quit. His teams have not given up. They have not rolled over, even though they've had several opportunities to roll over, several opportunities to just kind of quit, to say, hey, we're going to pack it in. We don't really feel like doing this tonight. They continue to play hard. They continue to fight hard. And that's not – I don't know that that's necessarily something, but it's also not nothing. And I think that plays into what I'm going to talk about with the Auburn game here in just a second. But big shout out to Matt Luke and the coordinators for coaching a team that has not rolled over or quit, and that's a big deal. So that was fun. Looking ahead, what do we do now? Again, I said last week that a big part of the reason that this was such a must-win game for Matt Luke and for Ole Miss was that if you win this game, you could develop some confidence going into the weeks ahead. Now, they somehow managed to get the win without really instilling any more confidence in the team than I had before. But, and this is a big but, you have got Auburn coming to town next week. Ole Miss, Auburn, 11 a.m., Oxford, Mississippi. And Auburn is so hard to read right now. They're terrible. Their offense is not clicking. Jarrett Stidham is really, really struggling. And it seems like I don't know this for sure, but it seems like there are some real off the field issues with Auburn right now that are kind of hurting them, keeping them back. And there's malcontent with Gus, and there are just a lot of things. There are a lot of things going on with Auburn that you say, hey, look, if we can go out there and if we can play the game we played on offense in the second half against Arkansas, if we can go do that, and if we can find a way to get pressure on Stidham, that's the important thing. You cannot allow Stidham to sit back there and pick you apart. You got to get pressure on him. You got to get in his face. You really need Charles Wiley. You need Ryder Anderson. You need Benito Jones. You need those defensive linemen to be getting in Stidham's face. You need to be putting them on the ground. You need to be, obviously nothing dirty, but you need to put them on the ground. You need Victor Evans kind of reminding him of his presence. You need those things to happen. And if those things happen, if you can get pressure on him, then I think that you can find a way to beat Auburn. And a team entering into November for Ole Miss, which is they'll play Auburn on the 20th. They're off on the 27th. So you're going to be entering to November with 6 wins, and I don't think anybody saw that happening. Definitely not Auburn. And so you're entering November when you still have South Carolina, Vanderbilt, and Mississippi State on your schedule. You could potentially get another road win at Vanderbilt, and you could potentially get another big SEC win over your in-state rival, and you could get South Carolina certainly looks beatable. So I don't necessarily know what I think about any of those teams, and I'm certainly not predicting wins for Ole Miss. But if you can beat Auburn and you can roll into November with 6 wins, you're in really good shape, and that's way ahead of the curve from kind of where I thought things would be, because there's a huge difference in coming back from Little Rock 4-3 and 5-2. So yeah, looking ahead, the rest of the year is really, really complicated. It's hard to kind of know, in part because I know with near certainty that Ole Miss is going to give up 500 yards in all those games. But none of the defenses left on Ole Miss's schedule are defenses that are really that intimidating. That's not to say they won't play well. It's not to say that they won't have big games, but it is to say that other teams have done a lot of things to them. And so, what? Yeah, I don't know. I realize that sitting here and saying I don't know repeatedly is not great podcasting or radio or whatever you want to call this. But you can see a very clear path to maybe 8-4. Which I kind of thought was an absolute ceiling for this team. You can just as easily see 5-7. Now I think 6-6 or 7-5 is more likely. I think they get one more. I don't know which one it is. I'm certainly not putting money on any of them. But yeah, it's going to be crazy to see. And Ole Miss still makes a lot of dumb mistakes. There still were plays against Arkansas, who's terrible. They're 1-6 on the year, and if they get a conference win this year, especially with Ty Story and Rakeem Boyd out, if they're out for any extended period of time, Arkansas may not win. Arkansas may not win a single game in the SEC all year. They play Tulsa this weekend, and I don't even know if I'm confident that they're going to beat Tulsa, especially if they don't have those players that are hurt and that are out. But Ole Miss as a team still makes a lot of stupid mistakes. There were still a lot of plays where guys were just running a long way untouched for Arkansas. Cole Kelly, who's terrible, his first pass of the game, he just threw a bomb for a touchdown. Now, Ole Miss eventually tightened down on him, and he did not play particularly well after that. But it still is something to be concerned about, and so we'll see, but I think that another win or two for Matt Luke gets him a lot of collateral going into the next year. It gives him a lot of reason for people to be optimistic, a lot of reason to be looking forward to it because eventually, it's hard because this is his second year as the coach, but it's his first real year. So this is his first year as his program, and so what do you expect? What do you expect going forward? And that's where I think it's so hard for a lot of Ole Miss fans to kind of look and see because you can win 8 games this year, you can win 7 games this year. You're not going to a bowl. That's disappointing, but that can be a lot of momentum leading into recruiting. And I don't think recruits are sitting there looking and thinking, well, I wasn't going to go to Ole Miss, but now they beat Arkansas, I'm going to. But at the same time, I don't think that they're really looking at losing to Alabama 62-7 and saying like, well, that pretty much rules them out for me. Like, no, I mean, you want to be able to show some progress. You want to be able to show recruits that there's excitement around the program. You want to show them that, hey, you know what, we've had a rough year so far, but even at 11 o'clock on a Saturday morning against a struggling Auburn team, this stadium is full. Like they're there to support you. They want to see you play. So this thing at this point is about looking better and continuing to improve. And then there still have to be staff changes after the season. I don't think that I don't like to call guys out. I don't like to really name names. That's not really my style. But I don't think that Phil Longo and Matt Luke, or Phil Longo and Wesley McGriff are the assistants that Matt Luke would have hired if he had a choice, if he had a say in the matter. And so I think Ole Miss has got to move on from both of those guys and find coordinators and find position coaches that can really do a good job of recruiting, but can also, on the offensive side of the ball, can balance things out. Like, going into next season, you're going to have Scotty Phillips coming back. You're going to have Isaiah Woolard, who has proven to be a capable backup. You've got to look at recruiting and think that there are a handful of guys that if you can land them, there's the Gray kid out of Memphis. There's Connor down in Hattiesburg. There's a handful of guys that if you can land them, then you can go into next season with a really balanced attack that maybe covers up for some of the deficiencies in the explosion that you lose when you lose A.J. Brown, DK Metcalf, DeMarcus Lodge. So there's a lot to build on. There are a lot of steps in the right direction. And I'm sitting here thinking, I was ready to fire everybody on the staff last week. And now I'm sitting here thinking, there's some real positives that we saw on Saturday. Nothing earth shattering, nothing that definitively says, hey, this was the right move. Matt Luke is the right guy, but enough to say, hey, I'm willing to give him a chance. I'm willing to give him some leeway as he goes into the offseason to maybe try to help build the program kind of in his own image a little bit more. And I think that's what Ole Miss fans are really looking for. And so how are you going to recruit? How are you going to change and build your staff? But yeah, so all that to say, it's complicated. I don't know what to expect on Saturday. I do think you're going to see a really, really inspired Ole Miss team playing. And I think you're going to see an Auburn team that if they get popped early, maybe mails it in, maybe gets a little lethargic. So we'll see. But as always, this has been Okay, I've Got Some Thoughts. I am Chandler. You can find me on Twitter. It's very uninteresting, but you can find me on Twitter at WC Rowland, ROWLEN. Find me there. I don't know. I'm on Facebook. I don't really do anything right now, so call me. Whatever you want to do is fine. But yeah, this has been Okay, I've Got Some Thoughts for running out the clock. And as always, I will talk to you next Monday. See ya.